Hey there, I'm Sully, and as always, welcome to the Gun Club. Alrighty, tonight we're doing a little weekly update on some of the week's events that have gone on, and it's been quite a week. If you didn't catch us last week, I know on Tuesday night, I believe, we had Jess on talking about her first time going to the range. That was a lot of fun. If you haven't checked that stream out, go back, check it out. Jess also runs a channel on YouTube known as Moxie Dame, Moxie Dame. You can check her out on there. Beyond that, tonight we're going to get into a little bit deep the events that transpired and some of the events that led up to it at Lakewood Church down in Houston, Texas. This happened on Sunday, the 11th. Kicked off just before 2 p.m. Now, for some of us on Sunday, I was kind of watching the Super Bowl, didn't hear much about it, then began getting little bits, notifications on my phone, sort of wondering, I was too busy trying to figure out whether or not the Kansas City Swifts were going to be able to come back and win the game or whether or not Travis was going to end up getting broken up with. Didn't know how that was going to work out for anybody, but fortunately, they won the game. He almost had the game-winning touchdown, just, a little bit short. Didn't quite get there. And again, maybe that's what she told him that night, too. Who knows? Beyond that, I think that could be really interesting, a little drama to watch coming out. But, I'm sure the last thing anyone wants to hear about here is the Super Bowl or what's her name. So let's dig into this whole event down in Texas. Now, for if you haven't heard, just before 2 p.m. at Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church, an individual entered the congregation area during a Spanish mass as they were setting up for a Spanish service. And the individual was wearing a trench coat, had a backpack, and the individual whips out a firearm, opens fire, dispenses somewhere between 15 to 30 rounds. Different reports, different versions of it, but pretty much opens up, does a spray and pray. Fortunately for the members of the congregation who were there were two off-duty law enforcement officers there as security guards, and as we all know, the only way to stop a bad guy or girl with a gun is a good guy or girl with a gun. So what happens? Well, the couple of good guys or girls there with guns, two good guys that happen to be off-duty law enforcement, open up and neutralize the threat, revoking the shooter's birth certificate on the spot. Okay, they want to go out that way. That's fine. Now, the minute the shooter is identified, of course, everybody in the media starts looking for information, trying to figure out what's going on, what it was, everything else. And unfortunately for the media, it wasn't some white guy wearing an NRA hat or a MAGA hat, so they couldn't use that. And so the next thing that had to happen, they had to come out and to start, it was the trans person who did it. Shooter was trans. Now, there is a possibility that the shooter was trans at some degree or had some gender issues. We'll leave it at that. I don't really buy that the shooter was totally trans. And I hate the fact that that is the first thing that the media and everybody in the press and online and on several podcasts has grabbed onto. Once again, I think it's demonizing people incorrectly. I've said it before, I've said it again. I have known, worked closely with, and have friends from every corner of the LGBT spectrum, as far as the QAI, whatever element of P, no. But the original four, the top four, I've worked with a bunch of them, and guess what? From my standpoint, I've known some that were really cool, some that were real jackasses, just like any other segment of society. And I hate that everybody wants to come out, oh my God, it's another trans shooter. Again, we'll debate whether or not the person was really trans or not, because there's some questions coming up. And I've been doing a lot of a deep dive. So let's see who we got in the chat so far tonight. Looks like Minnie's in the chat tonight. And her husband told her about this. Well, that I'm just not even going to make a comment right there, but I could. But yeah, the individual also, when they entered the church, had a child with them. It was actually a 7-year-old child, the shooter's own biological child, who was struck in the head by a round and is currently in critical condition at Texas Children's Hospital. Probably not looking too good for the home team. There was one person wounded, a 57-year-old male, struck in the hip. Appears to be superficial. From what I gathered, he was released either that day or the next day. So, okay. Interesting. Yeah, Joel wasn't there. We'll go with that one. But, so let's keep on digging here. Now, the individual who did it was a 36-year-old biological female who was originally from El Salvador. And I say this and I refer to her, and I will refer to her as a biological female because that's technically correct. And based on the fact that, yes, she did at times go by the name Jeffrey, and at sometimes had expressed to people in her life that she was trans. However, there's a question as to whether she was trans, as to whether or not she had detransitioned or sort of given away up on the trans thing, as to whether she had followed through with it or not. There's a lot of questions. And so to me, I'm going to go with the simplest one. At the time, they're saying she was identifying female. Cool, whatever. Now, this individual has had quite a track record. Arrests dating back to 2005 for assorted minor misdemeanor stuff. Had I think some drug arrests, a couple of misdemeanor pot arrests, one failure to yield to a blue light. 2016 had an emotional health order pickup for paperwork on that. Again, quite a colorful past. Evading arrest, forgery. I'm trying to see here. It looks like she may have pled guilty or pled that one down. That was in 2010. Assault bodily injury, 2009. Failure to stop and give information at a wreck, 2005. Definitely a colorful past. In December of 2010, she was actually being held for immigration on an immigration detainer, thus looking at potentially being sent back to El Salvador. And, well, apparently that was released, and so not an issue anymore, and she went free and was out running around. Now, the best version I can get of her is one version is from her mother-in-law. Now, she did go through a nasty divorce, and that was about 2021, 2022, during which time there was complaints from her ex-husband of her being violent, chasing him out of the house with a knife or knives in the past. Quite a few questions there about that. But her mother-in-law, made the comment that when she was on her meds, she was an absolutely wonderful lady. When she was not on her meds, she was absolutely impossible to deal with. So now I start questioning more. Is this a psych issue? Is this a psych system gone bad? Is this a patient who fell through the cracks of the psych system that it's going to be so much easier just to blame on something else? Well, when we look at the whole situation, and again, piles of minor criminal delinquencies, nothing really significant. The forgery, low-level forgery, was the highest one. Also, that the shooter's mother had been a member of the Joel Osteen Church. The shooter herself had contributed to the church in 2020. Okay. Again, seems to be at that point, or at least up until about 2020, has some minor brushes with the law, but seems to be pretty well functional. The 2021, 2022, the breakup, the divorce, there's a dispute between her and the ex-hubby's family The ex-hubby's family, the mother, ex-hubby's mother is a rabbi who tried to, at one point, petition for guardianship of the minor child who was injured in this event, just because of the fact that, again, she said very plainly, when she's on her meds, she's fine, but when she's not, she's a problem. So again, we've got this person who can be productive, who can be normal, who at one point they were saying had been involved in real estate. And again, you're watching a very big spectrum of on the meds versus not. And I think, we find an issue there. And to my opinion, a much bigger, more significant and more telling issue than whether or not they were trans or not, Now, the weapon that the individual used was an AR platform rifle. They also had a 22 caliber firearm in a backpack. They did have a Palestine sticker on the rifle, and the rifle was purchased back in December. They, in addition to the rifle, threatened that there was a bomb in their backpack. However, that turned out to be fake. There was no bomb there. She also tried spraying some type of liquid or substance in and on the congregation. Hazmat was called, couldn't identify it or find anything that was worth worrying about. So they go out they search her home in Conroe, Texas, about 50 miles north of the church, and they find chemicals there consistent with bomb-making materials, possible detonation cord, extensive anti-Semitic writings, which, again, don't know where that all plays into the whole thing, because, Joel Osteen is not exactly Rabbi Joel, at least from what I've ever gotten. I'm not particularly familiar with him. Somehow, having grown up in the old Roman Catholic Church and, don't quite understand pastors with private jets. Never quite been something that made sense to me, but I guess he just does the Lord's work, but faster. Then I read an article today, and this came out through Fox News, and it's courtesy of Danielle Wallace, and I follow her up on Twitter. She is a great follow on this one. She did a great job on the Fox News article. She interviewed several of the neighbors around her, trying to figure out what's the deal, what's going on with this woman. There is a question on how it was purchased, Mel. We don't know yet. They think it was legally purchased. Again, still a question on that. With the minor criminal offenses, it's possibly she could still get one legally. However, with the psych hold, again, depending if she had been re-adjudicated on that or not, or how that was handled, maybe not. There's still a lot of gray areas there. There are some issues in the law that even if someone's had a 72-hour hold, if they've been got their rights reinstated or been ruled that they're okay now, let's say they're back medicated again and they're fine, then they get their rights back. So, yeah, there's a question on purchase. Good question. I love it. But they talked to the neighbors. Now, the neighbors, several of them were interviewed for this article by Danielle Wallace, and Danielle did a bang-up job on this. Talked to at least 5 or 6 families nearby living around her. In July of 22, she pulled a gun on one of the neighbors for watering their lawn after dark. In July of 2022. Okay. Now, when you figure out in the summertime in July, a lot of people will water their lawn after dark. You don't want to do it in the hottest part of the day where it's all going to evaporate. She had put up cameras and baby monitors to record the neighbors at times. She would routinely, when one of the neighbors was working out in the yard, turn up loud, vulgar, threatening rap music and stare at the person, make Hail Hitler signs, the single finger victory salute, the not so family friendly version. Really interesting piece of work. And this, they said, went on for years. Another neighbor said she was walking her grandkids to the park one day, and this individual came past with a car and swerved at her as if to hit her and then laughed about it. So again, this has been a problem that's been going on. Um, One of the neighbors, her first name apparently is Jill, who lives right next door to her, said at one point the suspect changed her Wi-Fi name to Kill Jill. So that was getting broadcasted out. So anyone came in, it says, Kill Jill. So yeah, definitely some issues there. Although I got to admit, you want to talk about being some really passive aggressive stuff. Yeah, she did it. And that's what I keep finding. The more I dig, complaints from the husband, the ex-husband about violence, complaints from neighbors about violence, threats of violence, her mother-in-law, violence, threats of... You're not hearing the word trans in here, are you? Now, she had a really interesting episode with the post office. She had a vehicle that was parked in her driveway, such as to block the mailbox. So she didn't receive mail for several days as a result of it. If y'all don't know, the post office probably is not going to get out of the vehicle to walk around your parked car to get to your mailbox. You park in front of it, you don't get delivery that day. Dealt with that at my mom's house for a long time. So she goes down and makes a big stink with the local postmaster, stating and making a complaint that she was not getting her mail because the postman was transphobic. First time trans had ever come out of her mouth that we know of. So she goes down there and tells, them all this and tells them it's because they're transphobic. Okay. Well, they talk to the postal carrier. And the postal carrier says that's ridiculous. The reason I haven't been dropping there is because they've got the whole mailbox blocked. You can't get anywhere near it. So he goes there, brings her mail to her door to apologize, to explain why she's not getting the mail, and to, let her know it's nothing, no hard feelings, and to let the individual know that his son is trans. The postman's son is trans, and he really doesn't care. It's, again, one of those things that's not the issue. The issue is the car in front of the mailbox. She gets so violent and so threatening towards him that the postman who had delivered to that area for years, as long as the neighbors can remember, went back and requested that his route be changed for his safety. Now, he went to the house. Peace offering, here's your mail. I'm sorry about the problem. Nice guy. That post worker later called the neighbor, Jill, and told Jill she needed to be careful because the woman next door, who ended up being our shooter, was crazy and was after her as well. So 5 families get together and go to the local government. They went to the city council, they went to the local municipal building, talked with the PD, talked with everybody, and said, look, this is crazy. This woman is terrorizing everybody. She's aimed a gun at these grandkids. She swerved at these grandkids. She's putting Kill Jill on the Wi-Fi. She's threatening. She's got cameras out. She's walking around the yard with a crossbow or a long gun. And the police went out and did a mental health check. She didn't answer the door. So because of that point, they said, well, if she didn't answer the door, I guess she's not home, and that was all that was done. Now, I bring all this out not to throw rocks at the shooter, although, quite frankly, I'd be happy to stone her in anyone's temple, but I'm going to go with a different side. This is a mental health crisis that just went completely sideways, off the rails, and what happened? It kept brewing and brewing and brewing until something happened. The mother-in-law had tried twice to get custody of the kid. The ex-husband is now in Florida, where he's in jail for failure to register as a sex offender. Way to go, dude. So yeah, this woman is a train wreck. He had known her, since 2005, worked with her for a while at a local restaurant, got married to her, then to the point when she went off her meds, she was violent. Everyone has said that. Everyone has said she's been out of control and a complete menace to society. So the reason I go through this so deep, the media wants to talk about trans. I've seen 2 or 3 of the shows, the podcasts that have come out. Trans shooter, trans shooter, trans shooter. The least significant thing about her, in my opinion, is the fact she's trans. The most significant thing about her is the system dropped the ball. And once again, what's the old saying? Yeah, she was on the radar. Well, if you can get 5 families together during the day, during the week, taking time off from work to go to the local municipal building and talk to judges and cops and mayors and councilmen and say, what do we do about this? This menace in our little block, our nice little neighborhood. And with all these stories, and again, you read Daniel Wallace's article. I looked at it. I just took the high points out of it. When you read some of it, changing your Wi-Fi to kill Jill, threatening the post office, postal worker so bad that he gets a new route. There's something going on there. And nobody did nothing. And the thing is, unfortunately, the neighbors, the mother, or the mother-in-law, I should say, all tried. They all tried. Now, should it have been jail? Should it have been a mental facility? Should it have been long-term care? Should it have been deportation? I don't know. What we do know is the system dropped the ball. And I also wonder, and again, there's a lot of talk, again, of all the trans shooters. I'm wondering how many of these people are not actually trans and they go through a phase or an episode where they think they may be trans, but they're not, or they could be, but they're not sure, or they're trying, sort of grasping at straws. Is this what the problem is? I don't know. And, because they're falling through all the other cracks in society. I used to work doing transports to a psych facility, which was inpatient, had like some really nice locked doors and, secure facility, pads on the corners. But you know what? There was a place where people went and got help. I don't know what could have been done to help her, but I just really hated that this whole thing came out and has been used to, again, demonizing the entire thing as far as, the trans community. Because, like I said, the trans side of it, I think that played little, if anything, in this world. I think there's a hell of a lot of stuff that's a lot more interesting or unique or worthwhile looking at when we try to diagnose a cause, than whether or not she was male or female or what she went as this week. And again, Houston PD actually had a press conference about what her pronouns were. So, folks, how about we worry less about what people's pronouns are and more about if they're like in crisis perpetually for like months and months and months, and the neighbors get to the point that they go to the mayor, they go to the PD, they go to the judicial's offices. This one definitely slipped through the cracks and, as always, was on the radar. Alrighty, enough of that black pill for the day. I've got a couple of little bit white pills here. I've got a couple of good guys and gals with guns. One of them I was actually chatting or texting back and forth with Carrie Sloan earlier, and I told her that, this has been kind of an interesting day because of some of the stuff that has dropped in as far as this, the last case I did. But then there's this one, and wow. Comes out to us from Alexandria, Alabama on the 6th of February, Tuesday afternoon. A woman there shot her ex-husband as he was breaking into her home. The 47-year-old male was shot and wounded on scene. The shooter and her daughter remain uninjured. Now, the interesting thing when we look at the offender's history, the intruder's history, he had 4 charges previously for violating a protective order, 6 arrests for same beginning in 2022. He actually had an active warrant at that point out for violating a protective order from earlier that day, and he was already out on bond for a previous violation of a protective order. Now, when I say, ladies, Protective order is just a piece of paper. Restraining order is just a piece of paper. It don't stop anybody. This guy is the textbook for that. What happened? 4 violations of a protective order, plus he had arrest warrants out. He had already been arrested and was let back out on bond. So he did it again. That was a warrant out for that one. So then he's back over there that afternoon. And he's forcibly entering her home. And what did she finally do? Well, she finally shot him. And there have been no charges. Again, it appears to be a good shoot per local PD. And basically, it's one of those things of, what's the old saying? When seconds count, cops can be minutes away. So, again, hats off to this good girl with a gun. She took care of herself. She took care of her kid. That's all we can ask, folks. That's all we can ask. So, again, as much as we demonize firearms, as much as people want to say that, oh, no good comes from having a gun in the house or anything else, we hear all these statistics. I sent this article over to Carrie Sloan, and I said, well, you look at this. Apparently, we know what it took to get him to stop breaking into her house. A bullet. Sorry, dude, but you pushed it as far as you could. And then while I was researching that one, this one came up, also out of Alabama. I don't know what it is about Alabama. Maybe, Nick Saban going away has got everybody upset down there, or, the Tide not doing too hot this year, or what. I'm not sure. But all I know is Alabama is apparently rocking and rolling Tide. A homeowner wakes up at about 4 a.m. with someone trying to break into their house. They call 911 like we all would do. However, prior to the police department getting there, the intruder kicks in the door and makes entry to the residence. The homeowner opens fire, striking the intruder, who retreated outside and was found deceased just outside the door. Once again, law enforcement says, shoot looks legit. The door is kicked in. The body's right there. It is what it is. Justifiable self-defense. So when you look at the big thing, again, we've got 2 right there, one on the 10th, one on the 6th, and I found several others. These 2, again, both right in Alabama, which doesn't have that much of a population, but they're sure kicking in some doors down there. Once again, when seconds count, police couldn't get there in time. What happens to either of those individuals in their own home? They didn't do anything wrong. They weren't out in a bad neighborhood. We can't worry about how they were dressed or whether or not they were wearing too much jewelry in the wrong neighborhood, and that's why they got knifed or carjacked or whatever. No. They're in their own damn homes. And what's happening? Bad guys coming in, kicking in doors, and threats getting neutralized. So it is what it is, folks. But yeah, those were the 2 I had for this week. I definitely wanted to hit on those and give us a little bit of a palate cleanser after the whole trans shooter thing. Honestly, like I said, to me, the fact that, the individual was and again, were they trans? There's a lot of question there. The police were saying that not to their knowledge recently. There was a question as far as the postal incident was the only time we'd ever heard that the individual identified themselves as being trans. The ex-husband, can't really ask him because he's a guest of the Florida Department of Corrections. So it is what it is. The biggest thing I look at when we get to the whole thing, even if they were or if they weren't, who cares? Biggest thing to me is total mental health system failure. And they tell you, if you see something, say something. Well, guess what? The neighbors said something. The mother-in-law said something. Everyone said something. And the system let one fall through the cracks. Now, how and why it fell through the cracks, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if it would be, is it better or worse that things fall through the cracks? And that's a discussion we can have someday. Well, do we want them to be all gung-ho to immediately lock people up on mental health holds? Let's say maybe you believe something that's unpopular and, Let's see here. Did I say how the Lakewood shooter was stopped? Two off-duty police officers revoked her birth certificate, or their birth certificate, or his birth certificate. They got acute high-velocity lead poisoning. But yeah, and again, unfortunately, we've got a 7-year-old little boy who it's not looking real good for. We've got, if he survives, it's going to be a miracle to begin with. That being the case, grandma's coming up to try to see what she can do. She is the rabbi, so she's going to hopefully have at least some sort of support system for the kid, be able to do some good for the kid. But yeah, you just kind of got to wonder. And I will say this, if someone's breaking into your home, I can tell you what not to do.
If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun, have the shells, a 12-gauge shotgun, and I promise you, as I told my wife, we live in an area that's wooded and somewhat secluded. I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony here or walk out, put that double-barrel shotgun and fire 2 blasts outside the house. I promise you, who's ever coming in is not going to, you don't need an AR-15.
Don't do that at home, please. Just remember, whatever goes up must come down, and we really don't want that. That's a bad thing. I mean, come on. I think anyone knows that. But with that, folks, y'all have a wonderful one. I'll probably be back on Thursday, and definitely look forward to a late night stream on Friday. We're going to have a lot of fun Friday with a late show. It's going to be alcohol-fueled debunking a letter from experts. There's a letter floating around by a military arms expert who was hired by the great state of California to explain the finer points of AR-15s to them. I've got a copy of all the signed affidavits, and we're going to have some laughs. So otherwise, y'all take care. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.